Thank you for calling that out, as we are speaking about teams today. So, JJ, thank you for the brief introduction. I don't know if I've gotten the opportunity to meet many of you. So, my name is Nicole Dickie. And as JJ shared, I am the senior consultant on Hogan's Asia Pacific team. So, I get to work alongside Krista and Anne Marie to support our distributors across the Asia Pacific region. So, you might hear a few stories about Krista and Anne Marie as we go through today's session. We actually have a lot of content to cover. We'll start with a brief introduction to teams. We'll look at how we can use personality data to increase teams' strategic self-awareness. I'll share two real-world case studies from Hogan's work with teams, and then finally provide a few best practices in how you can elevate and accelerate your team's performance. And really, our goal here is to help you gain the insights you need to achieve optimal team performance. So let's dive in already. I want to give a brief description of teams that have been really highly successful. How many of you are familiar with Alibaba? Alibaba has acquired a controlling stake in Lazada, so you probably are familiar with it, even if you're not familiar with the name. And the origin of Alibaba is quite interesting. So the famous CEO Jack Ma and his 17 friends, they worked together in his apartment in Hangzhou, China in the late 1990s. This was a small group of people who were extremely focused on launching their platform. This was a B2B platform that was connecting Chinese manufacturers to global overseas buyers. And they were pooling all of their resources, all of their energy, working interdependently for this shared specific task. Now, what about NASA? Some of you are probably familiar with Apollo 11, and this was the United States NASA sending people to walk on the moon. So we probably know the names of Neil Armstrong or Buzz Aldrin. They were the faces of the mission, but there were actually hundreds of thousands of team members working together with a shared mission and vision and goal to accomplish. So what about you? You can have a think on your highest performing teams. Have you ever worked on a team that had a shared mission and vision and achieved the goal? As we get started today, I want to briefly give a baseline of understanding of the current state of teams as we get started. So this may be surprising to you, or maybe not. We've seen a significant increase in organizations using teams over the past 40 years. When we're looking at Fortune 1000 companies, about 40 years ago, only 28% of organizations said, yes, we use teams to accomplish complicated goals. But now, that's about 50 to 70% of organizations are saying, yes, we use teams. I think you guys know how to use the react, but give me a heart or a thumbs up or a clap if your organization uses teams to accomplish important goals, complicated goals. Nice. Okay. Thanks. Thank you all. Good. So you're like most of the Fortune 1000 companies. You are using teams to accomplish goals that you could not do on your own. Now, when we look at the way that we spend our time in a given workday or work week, likely your working time is spent in meetings or on collaborative tasks. According to a Harvard Business Review, collaborative work has increased by 50% in the last 2 decades. You can see on the screen, over 50% of individuals say 30% of my time is in a team setting. So I want you to give me a clap, or a heart if you would say, in my day, 30% of my day is in a team setting. I'm working in a meeting, I'm working on a collaborative task, maybe 30% or more. Okay, yeah, thank you. Maybe not 50% of you, but quite a few. So finally, and importantly, happiness does not equal effectiveness. So in the world of Hogan assessments, we have a saying, maybe a framework for explaining human behavior. Humans evolved in groups, and there are different ways to find meaning, to get along, and to get ahead. And when we think about this with a team, just because a team gets along with one another doesn't mean that they are going to get ahead or achieve the goal, beat the competition, achieve that shared goal. So companies and organizations oftentimes put their resources in the HR budget to, helping people get to know each other better. Maybe engage in activities like icebreakers. Maybe even use some kind of assessments to get to know you better. Like I worked for an organization that used a different product, and we all took the assessments and then kind of got to know each other better. But that social cohesion, that getting to know you, does not produce the return on investment that organizations might think it does. And actually, organizations should focus on winning because winning actually helps bring people together and get along better. So we should not be aiming for getting along, having happiness. We should be aiming for a shared goal and winning. We'll talk more about that in a bit. So when we actually ask employees about their experience with teams, we find that employees rate teamwork as very important. 75% of respondents rated teamwork is very important. If you think teamwork is very important, give me a heart, give me a clap, give me a reaction. Nice, thank you. A few of us do. No, remember, goals are complicated. People can't finish them on their own. People think that this is important to work in teams. But we also see that 40% of employees say they do not collaborate enough. And so, where does that leave us? Well, only 50% of teams are actually effective at achieving their goals and the goals that leadership have set out for them. That is flipping a coin. So instead of flipping a coin, let's talk about ideas for increasing your team's ability to succeed. But first, let's talk about what it means to be a team. So, at the most high fundamental level, a team is a group of interdependent individuals who are working together for a common goal. So, teams have three or more people. Again, they're dependent on one another. So if we think back to Apollo 11, NASA estimates that over 400,000 people, that's engineers, that's technicians, that's astronauts, that's scientists, were all working together to make landing on the moon possible. And people's tasks depended on one another very intricately, very precisely. When we think of Alibaba, there were 18 individuals working interdependently to create this platform. Now, if you think of my team at Hogan, as you already got to meet the lovely Krista and Anne Marie, we work on interdependent tasks all the time. For example, excuse me, co-authoring a newsletter. Maybe I will do the first draft, then Anne Marie and Krista will revise it based on their knowledge and their experiences. Next, teams share a common goal. This is defined mission, purpose, and goal, and shared commitment to that goal. So for Apollo 11, the common goal was getting the astronauts on the moon. All employees, all tasks were all centered around that common goal. For Alibaba, that was launching the e-commerce platform, that connected Chinese manufacturers to global sales opportunities. And this is where I think it's important to think about getting along versus getting ahead. Like we said, the evidence shows that the bond between people is less important than the bond between the goal, that shared mission, that shared vision, that shared goal. So, of course, the Apollo 11 astronauts met with their colleagues, met with them face to face, visited laboratories, visited the control rooms. Of course, there were elements of getting along, but it was all around the shared goal. They did not sit there and do icebreakers. Next, it comes to common leadership. So for Alibaba, Jack Ma was that founder and overall leader to all of the individuals. And then finally, teams share success and failure with one another. So again, landing on the moon, all of these hundreds of thousands of employees were working towards this one goal. There was success or there was failure. At Alibaba, those 18 employees are working together to accomplish the e-commerce platform, launching it, seeing sales increase. There might be instances where someone who is near to you, who shares your leadership, who seems to be on your team, actually does not share your success and failure. So for example, Krista, Anne-Marie, and I have other colleagues on our team who are focused on other regions, maybe the US or Latin America or Europe. Well, our success is not exactly the same. So even though we sit on the same department, our success and failure is not interdependent. So at a high level, teams tackle tasks that are too complicated for any one person to handle by themselves. That's even more and more as the world gets more globalized and more connected to technology. Teams are the backbone of success for organizations, really important for innovation, for ensuring quality, and achieving complicated goals. Now, one side note here is that a lot of times, a group of individuals might be mistaken for a team. Maybe they sit together in an office or work in the same department. But again, for a team to be a team, there has to be interdependent tasks and shared success. So now we've got a full understanding on what it means to be a team, why teams are important for organizations today. Let's move on to personality. So there's a lot of literature in the team space that talk about how we can create high-performing teams, high-functioning teams. And a lot of that focuses on some proper mix of skills and experiences, but often can ignore one of the most important determiners of behavior, and that's personality. At Hogan, we have been examining personality and performance for over 40 years. So I'm excited to share some of our insights and frameworks for how personality can improve team performance. And so when we think about teams and team personality, we will get there, I promise. But it's important to start at the individual level because it's really individuals who make up a team. So I'd like to introduce, if you're not familiar with Hogan's perspective on personality, really there are 3 core assessments that make up a very wide and deep look at someone's personality. And the first is the Hogan Personality Inventory, or the HPI. That is the bright side of personality and looks at somebody's day-to-day strengths and weaknesses or areas of opportunity. If somebody is going into an interview, this is probably the facet of personality that is on display, someone putting their best foot forward. This helps you or us understand, can this person do the job? Next, we move to the Hogan Development Survey, or the HDS. This looks at overused strengths that might derail your career or inhibit your success. This comes out in times of stress and pressure, and it helps us understand what is going to get in your way. Finally is the MVPI, or the Motives, Values, Preferences Inventory. That's going to look at someone's goals, motivators, drivers, interests. It helps us understand the type of culture someone creates or really what they want in a team or organizational culture. This is going to be all really important as we move on to looking at the team level personality. But personality really helps us determine how you behave. Personality is going to give us insight into behaviors, into actions, into how someone will react, and how someone is going to interact or get along or not with others. It can give us insight into how someone will execute their business strategy, to manage change, manage conflict, and manage people. It will give us insight into strengths, watchouts, how someone makes decisions, and the likely culture they will create. And when looking at leadership, it helps us understand how effective someone will be at leading people. And this brings us to self-awareness. Personality really can provide the basis of strategic self-awareness. Now, in psychology, there's a widely held idea about self-knowledge or self-awareness. It's becoming aware of your thoughts, your emotions, your strengths. Maybe it's getting in touch with your feelings or your inner child, and is very important in therapy, traditional therapy. But when it comes to workplace performance, we would say that it's not as useful as strategic self-awareness, which has three key components. The first is understanding your own strengths and limitations. The next is understanding how those strengths and limitations compare to other people. And then finally, it's taking that base of strengths and limitations and learning how I need to change my behavior and adapt my behavior to increase effectiveness. So this is about knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, knowing your comparative advantages, how you compare to others. And those who are seeking strategic self-awareness, they want feedback. They're going to ask for feedback. They're going to act on that feedback. They're going to make changes based on that feedback. And they're likely to be more successful, making better decisions, influencing their team morale and engagement, and making organizations better. So what we just talked about on personality and strategic self-awareness, yes, that's so important at the individual level. But now let's take it up to the team level. Because teams bring their own unique challenges, right? You're not just thinking about one person, now you're thinking about one person, multiple people, how they are interacting, and the tasks that they face. So team strategic self-awareness just brings up that construct to the next level. This is the degree to which your team understands its own strengths and weaknesses, understands the diversity of strengths and weaknesses within the team and how they relate to one another. And finally, how the team is adapting to increase effectiveness. Now, research shows us for teams that they're more likely to excel and be successful when they have spent more time together, working together, training together. But sometimes we do not have a lot of time to ramp up our teams. Focusing on team strategic self-awareness can help us to accelerate this process because, again, we're knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses very quickly and having conversations about this in the context of performance, which we'll talk about even more. So I'd like to introduce you to Hogan's framework for developing that team strategic self-awareness. There are three key facets here. The first is team roles. So this is going to clarify, based on people's personality, what role they might naturally fall into, what key strengths they have and are contributing to the team. Teams can be effective as long as critical roles are filled. Sometimes, if those critical roles are not filled, that might lead to inhibited performance. The second are team derailers. So this data is going to highlight where there might be blind spots on the team. We all know that people individually and at the aggregate level have issues that could hinder performance. Oftentimes, these come out when times are stressful, when there's high strain, or even when they're bored. People are bored. So we'll look at 11 ways that the team might derail. And then finally is team culture. So this is bringing to light the team's values and culture. Shared values really help the team to create a distinctive culture. And research finds that when teams' values are shared, that really increases stability on the team. People want to stay when they feel like they belong. So, for example, Krista and Anne Marie, they're both high science, meaning that they value data and analysis and learning. And I too individually hold this value. So, when I joined the team, that value was reinforced and encouraged. And really, I felt a part of something. However, on the other hand, team performance can suffer if values are misaligned. So we'll look at 10 values used to describe team culture in just a minute. So when we look at this all together, this can provide insights and recommendations to implement to enhance performance. Okay, so let's look at team roles. There are 5 informal psychological roles that individuals on the team might fulfill. The first is results. So these are the individuals who are taking the lead, taking the role of directing the team. They're helping everybody know what each person should be doing. They're good at delegating. They're good at breaking up these tasks into manageable actions and providing direction to different team members and holding people accountable, evaluating outcomes, and driving generally for performance. The next is pragmatism. So, this is someone who you can see here provides practical, hard headed evaluations. This person is not afraid to take an unpopular opinion. Maybe they will even enforce something that is not very popular. They're pragmatic, direct, and really grounded in reality. Someone who has high pragmatism might say, this is enough. We've been working on this problem. Now we have to face it. We have to take a direction. We have to deal with the conflict. The next is innovation. So people who are fulfilling the role of innovation, they're going to have strategic perspectives. They're going to have a vision for the team's future. They can see trends emerging and patterns emerging. They like to solve new problems. And they're focused on change, on vision, on ideas. Number 4 is process. People who are leaning into this process role, they're implementation focused on structure, on tasks, finding a way to implement. They tend to be reliable, organized, and focused, attuned to details. And then finally, last but not least, is relationships. So these individuals are very concerned about the team morale, building relationships, feeling socially connected. They want there to be harmony on the team and cooperation. Interestingly, these who are, very empathetic are also good advocates for external stakeholders. So they can feel want to be connected to and champion maybe a client or someone outside of the team. So these are the 5 team roles. The next part of our structure is looking at team derailers. So all teams and all team members have a few characteristics that might inhibit or undermine performance of the team. But then when multiple people have that same derailing characteristics, this can be magnified and be a potential issue for the team. This can be a shared blind spot. Shared derailers tend to be more exaggerated. People from outside the team tend to notice this. And there are several places that a team can derail. So in the Hogan Development Survey, we have 11 derailers. The first 5 fall into the category of moving away from people in stress and pressure. This looks like managing anxiety by pushing people away. And there are different ways that this could happen. Being emotionally volatile, excitable, being cynical and distrustful, skeptical, resisting change or being afraid of failure, cautious, being socially withdrawn, reserved, or finally, being indifferent to others, maybe passive aggressive, stubborn. That's leisurely. The next category of derailers deals with moving against people or managing anxiety by trying to control or manipulate others. This could look like being arrogant or entitled, high bold, testing limits and taking risks, mischievous, being theatrical and dramatic, colorful, thinking in unproductive and impractical ways, imaginative. And then finally, the last category is moving towards people. So managing that stress and anxiety by trying to get to know people, build alliances, move towards people. This could look like being overly careful and critical, diligent, or being overly eager to please, dutiful. Now, you'll see on the right-hand side, you can see it's a 76. So it is in red. It is a key team derailer. And this means it's a shared derailer by over half of the team having high or moderate risk on this derailer. So anything that's red and you can see is going to be this key team derailer. And then finally, our final section is on team culture. Now, team members have their own individual values and drivers that are guiding their own actions. And when a majority of the team holds the same values in common, this is when the team can actually bond more easily. So the shared values and drivers can influence how people feel belonging and can actually really anchor the team and team performance. When we look at the 10 different scales, we see there are 4 different clusters you could consider, but we'll go through them one by one. The first is recognition. This is someone who is valuing fame, visibility, and publicity. Power is valuing competition, influence, and achievement. And hedonism is valuing fun, a good time, working hard, play hard, variety. The next bit is altruistic. So altruistic is dealing with having a strong concern for helping others and improving society. Affiliation is really building social networks and feeling belonging and genuine sense of teamwork. Tradition deals with valuing history, valuing particular ways of behaving, traditional ways of behaving. The next are financial, with security being concerned with avoiding risk, predictability, and obviously security of all kinds. Commerce is valuing making money, earning a profit. And then finally is our decision-making scales with aesthetics valuing creativity and self-expression. And finally, science valuing technology, rational problem solving, using data to drive decisions. And so on the right-hand side, you can see the example here. The graphic shows um, the scoring key moving from low scoring team members, low moderate score, or high score. So you can actually have a team driver if 50% or more of the team is on the lowest range or highest range. So on these values, you might have high on hedonism or you might have a low on hedonism. So it can be a shared value at the high end of the scale or at the low end of the scale. It's important to note here that 100% alignment is not going to be attainable. We should not expect that of our teams. But alignment on some key values can be really important and even essential for building that team cohesion. So the Hogan Team Report in totality is going to help understand how members of the team's personality and motivators are going to support and potentially hinder team's effectiveness in light of the team's makeup, the business, the context, the goals. So, in addition to team roles, derailers, and team values culture, the team report also shows individual scores. So, this final section is going to help give a visual of how different team members are contributing to the overall team profile. It's going to help individuals better understand how they fit in with the trends of the larger team so they can understand themselves better and the team personality better. So the Hogan Team Report has a lot of wonderful potential outcomes for you, your organization, and your teams. It can help improve collaboration and communication. This is through understanding your roles of the fellow teammates, how they're responding in stress, how your scores compare to the aggregate, and can really help understand expectations of the team for collaboration, working style, and communication. Furthermore, it can help to diagnose these areas of productive and unproductive conflict, particularly, again, where you're looking at the individual versus the team. You'll be able to pinpoint where there is likely conflict. This can also remove barriers to alignment because you're understanding people's tendency towards their work, the roles they're fulfilling, and how they're motivated. This can increase retention and overall stability on the team. Because when you find that shared value and start to really lean into that, this can increase stability, commitment to the team. It can increase satisfaction on the team, commitment to the team, and decrease turnover intentions, or the likelihood people will leave. This can also help you identify your ideal team composition because you can start to see where you measure up and where there might be gaps. So, for example, taking stock of which team members fall into which roles, and then looking at where there might be a gap in a certain team role, like results or like implementation. We'll look at this a little bit more in the case studies. Finally, this report can help, this report can help align your team personalities and team goals by delving into unique insights customized to your particular team. And then if and as you decide to layer on any services, consulting from Absolute Talent Solutions, I mean, there's so much depth and richness that can come from this team report, like we'll look at in a minute. And then most importantly, this can maximize your team's effectiveness and real world business outcomes like profitability by understanding your team's need, by increasing interpersonal trust, contributing to these efficiencies, work products, overall effectiveness, and real world business outcomes. So I'd like to introduce two case studies from our work with organizations in the Asia Pacific region. The first is looking at a manufacturing plant here in Asia. So there was a newly onboarded plant manager. He had come from the organization's headquarters country. He had done some time, done a rotation in this Asian country, had gone back to headquarters, now was back with an expanded scope to his role and a new mandate from his headquarters. So he'd expanded his scope, moved back in this expatriate position. This leader was new, and a lot of the leadership team or management team was new as well. So there had been turnover, there was a reorganization, there was some new reporting structures, and obviously the leader being new as well. There was a big mandate, strong pressure from headquarters to expand the manufacturing site with the expectation to double the output in a sustainable way. So this is a big, big ask, big expectations on this new leader. So the new leader, he wanted to quickly understand who is in my team, what are their individual strengths, areas of opportunity, but what's our team strengths and areas of opportunity. So he wanted to get a quick understanding of the team's dynamic and to gain alignment quickly because he was on the hook for doubling the output in a sustainable way. So what we can see here is the team scores for this manufacturing plant. You can look at the team roles. We have results as a 36, pragmatism an 18, innovation 82, process 55, and relationships 36. So this helps us to understand their team data, innovation being their strongest area. These were very innovative people across the board. They're good at adapting, solving problems, generating new and creative ideas. But there was a lack of people who were advocating for pragmatic solutions, maybe willing to say the unpopular opinion, and a lower amount of people being interested and concerned for the morale of the team. So we can see here the results orientation, the pragmatism, and the relationships are all below 50. So there's not too many people who are fulfilling these roles. Even if we have great idea generators and even some process creators with process being 55, who is delegating the work, holding people accountable, driving for results, speaking out, uh, holding people accountable, speaking out truth, if you will, and building relationships. So they have some gaps in terms of who is doing what on the team. Next, we look at team derailers. So you can see that there's a tendency towards being reserved. So reserved is their highest shared derailer of 78. So teams with a shared derailer of reserved, they might tune out information that they don't want to hear. Maybe when times are stressful, they will shut their door or maybe not even come into the office if they can help it, come into the manufacturing plant if they can help it. A lot of communication is going to be task-based, and there's just not a strong spirit of teamwork on this team under stress and pressure. So when we think about other people working with this team, people might think that they're difficult to work with because they're not really warm. They're not really socially sensitive. They're not really strong at building that rapport with other teams. Next, we can see that bold is their second highest derailer. So a team with the shared derailer of bold might have difficulties remaining cohesive because they all think that they know best and they might overestimate their abilities and their talents. People outside of the team look at them and feel like they're not going to listen to me. They think they know everything and they don't know their own limits. And then finally, imaginative is the last shared derailer. So teams with imaginative as a shared derailer, they might not always be that logical. They really like creative ideas, and that can seem impractical. So they might have trouble getting things done because the ideas just really are not practical. And other people might have a difficult time working with this team because they feel frustrated that they're out of touch with what can be done in the organization. So finally, we look at the values. The first shared value is altruistic. This is really quite interesting in the context of this team because they have this shared desire to help people, to mentor, to build the team. And usually, this tends to come across as sympathetic and concerned about others, maybe even soft hearted and not pushing for results. I'll just say I think it's interesting given that they have a relatively low score on the relationships role and high reserve tendency. They might want to help others, but their behaviors are inhibiting them engaging in that. And then finally, the other shared value is science. So teams with high science value, they're going to be curious and analytical and interested in how things work, like to solve complex problems and keep up with trends. But to others, they might seem overly concerned with details and getting enough information. Okay, so what happened with this team? Well, the team used the Hogan report in the context of a team session, but this team session was focused on business outcomes. Again, we're not just getting to know you for the sake of it, we are getting to know each other for the shared goal, the business outcome goal. And this goal was very clear of doubling the output of the plant in a sustainable way so they could retain an engaged workforce. So the team report highlighted some tendencies. There are strong ideas, but maybe not implementation. They lack creating the steps to action that work and to delegate and to follow through. So, in this team session with our authorized distributor in this country, the leadership team brainstormed ways that they could manage derailers and really improve performance. So, for example, before they made any decisions, they committed to going back to their teams, asking for implementation and action plans that they could come back, take to the management team, and present. Hey, we had all these ideas. Here's how my team thinks that we can implement them. And this was to make sure their ideas, their strong innovation focus, could be actionable. And from the perspective of the new leader, understanding the makeup of his team helped him to understand where there are gaps that he needed to fill, particularly in driving for results and creating that team relationship and cohesion. But it also helped him to know if I get the opportunity to hire someone new into this role, these are the trends or the roles and the values that might be a good fit for my team. Additionally, the team realized that they had less emphasis on that relationship piece and the building trust piece, and they had this strong tendency to isolate themselves in times of stress and pressure. So they committed to each other, hey, I'm going to give you the okay to call out if I have excuses for avoiding. You can ask me if it's legitimate. They encourage strong participation in team meetings, even if it was stressful, to actively work on sharing knowledge and building those connections. They also committed to remaining open to feedback, especially in times of stress and pressure. And so the results were really positive. There was an effective assimilation of the leader and the overall management team. And this leader, as I already mentioned, learned how to adapt his behaviors to suit the needs of the team, providing clear delegation, providing accountability, providing follow up, continuing to align all things towards the shared goal. It enhanced the team dynamic by creating a greater understanding of one another and a stronger emphasis on the execution of ideas and team cohesion. And finally, it did accelerate business success, contributing to the manufacturing plant's overall goal of doubling their output in a sustainable way. Okay, I want to introduce our second case study. This is a global supplier in New Zealand, and this leadership team would need to lead a skeptical, science-based organization into a future with a lot of really high expectations and change. So in this situation, there was a leadership team, group of 8, including the new CEO, and they wanted to explore how their leadership team could leverage their strengths and weaknesses in order to implement the board's new mandate, which again was doubling the size of the business. A lot of high expectations from the boards, it seems, or from headquarters. So to do this, it was going to have a strong shift in the way that people did business at this organization. So, a little bit about this new leadership team. They were really goal oriented, competitive, and ambitious. And when the new CEO came in, of course, as there often is, there was some turnover, but then it was this big shot of energy to the organization. The leadership team is raising the standards, holding people accountable. People who aren't performing are leaving the company. Everything felt, a lot of energy and buzz. Then behaviors started to emerge that were not helpful for performance. Um, this leadership team spent a lot of time broadcasting their vision, but no time listening to the feedback from the organization. They were not paying attention to the details of implementation. So they had these really strong goals, but no pathway for their teams to actually implement the goals. So the board was not happy with how things were going. So they came to the former authorized distributor um, in New Zealand and wanted an intervention for the team. So, as you might imagine, you can see here in the results that this was a great team for driving for results. They had big vision, big ambition, but there were gaps, particularly in resourcing, sequencing, creating a process or procedure. You can see here on their 25 on process. So less reliable, organized, and attuned to the details. Implementing and actioning the ideas was more difficult. You can see here that they also had a very distinctive, excuse me, um, distinctive derailleur, and that's colorful. That was actually the only shared derailleur that they had. So those who score high on colorful tend to like being recognized for their accomplishments. They might tend to call attention to themselves, be good or at least enjoy multitasking. And for a team that has the shared derailleur of colorful, they might have trouble staying organized, keeping on task, and people outside of the team might see them as disorganized, as unfocused, as overly committed. That makes sense that they were taking on pet projects and not really focused on the shared goal of doubling the organization. They were in broadcast mode because they liked getting that recognition, but having trouble listening to feedback. I guess it's no surprise that their shared value was recognition, wanting to lead, drive, have achievements, have their accomplishments, seen and valued. So, what happened in the story? As we said, the CEO had become self aware. He was astute enough, listening enough to the board to hear the organization saying there are some unhealthy patterns emerging. And the Hogan report helped to reveal this picture of the team and give us insights into the individual team members as well as the entire team. And the first kind of key result was building a strong coaching and development plan for each member of his leadership team and the team itself. He instituted a 2-year program of meetings where they would review their collective and individual profiles, reflect on improvements and progress, and listen to feedback from the organization. And this virtuous cycle really led to longer term accountability. So the CEO took a very strategic view of goal setting and goal alignment to make sure, as we said, the whole team is working towards a shared goal. And in the end, they did see successful doubling of the business over a 5-year period of time. So I know we're getting to the end. Thank you for your listening to these stories. Now that we've looked at these case studies, I want to share a few best practices for that long-term performance improvement of teams. And team level strategic self-awareness really is critical to evaluating and accelerating your team performance. You can see this model here. Allow me to explain a little bit. On the left-hand side, you can see Hogan's 3 core assessments, and the Hogan team report can really anchor, be a base for developing that team strategic self-awareness. But it doesn't help to just be self-aware. We have to change our behavior. And the way that that looks like is, okay, first building awareness, strengths, weaknesses, understanding how other people in the organization view the team, then understanding what behaviors need to change, starting with just 1 or 2. For example, the management team at the manufacturing plant, they lacked that drive and delegation. So the leader targeted those behaviors that he needed to change to fill that gap. Even though that was not his tendency, he could target behaviors and work to change. That change over time can help to modify the team's reputation. It's important to find trusted sources of feedback to give you touch points along the way to the journey of behavioral change. Eventually, it's really important to seek more formal feedback. That could be a leader 360, a team 360. That could be an employee engagement survey, some way for feedback to come back to you about your behaviors. And then finally, as you begin to find success in your behavioral change, this is going to internalize and lead towards this maturity of the team. You can then go back to the build awareness, go back to the start, self-reflect, choose a new goal. I will say all of this is in the context of a shared goal and objective. I think the manufacturing plant example is very helpful because Hogan's data, team data, needs to be within the context of the goal. Now, some final thoughts. What about groups? There might be some people who sit together in the same department, maybe even report to the same leader, but who do not meet our definition of a team. We recommend focusing on individual self-awareness and individual development. If you want to look at the aggregate, we'd say look at the values, because again, values are going to be linked to retention and stability. But in terms of intervening, we recommend looking at, the individual level. Okay, so as we close, just a few more thoughts. Use personality at the individual level as that foundation for strategic self-awareness. This can help team members understand their own strengths and areas of opportunity as a basis for understanding how they fit in the team. Next, measuring the team level reputation to increase understanding of the team, how they work within the team, and how other people see the team. What's their competitive advantage to others? And then finally, continuously develop the team self-awareness through that model I showed, small behavioral changes and feedback. And in the long term, this can lead to reputation changes, increased performance, and always anchor this behavioral change in the context of the shared goal.